Hey, GrowWire listeners, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the GrowWire podcast. I'm your host, Fritz Nelson, and I'm joined, as always, by Kendall Fisher, producer and host of the GrowWire Show.
You forgot to add top number one favorite employee of all time, also best friend.
I think that Kendall's going to be very verbose on this show today, but we have a great guest. On this episode, we're joined by well-known angel investor and creator and host of the popular podcast This Week in Startups, Jason Calacanis. But before we get into his many successes, we take it back to the beginning. We learn about his childhood, growing up in Brooklyn, his college days at Fordham, where he originally planned to join the FBI. You know, I really think I would have been a good FBI agent.
Do you?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I'm very stealth. Jason, though, he became obsessed by this thing called the internet, and he kicked off a career that would reflect that obsession. He talks about starting his career at the New York Times, reporting on the internet industry. Now you have to understand that in the 90s, it was an industry like it just is now, right? I mean, it's not an industry anymore.
The internet just is. I don't remember those days. I was a young girl.
Gleam in somebody's eye. Well, we talk also about his learning the ins and outs of investing at Sequoia Capital and what his criteria are for investing in companies today, his biggest fundraising tips for entrepreneurs, and his overall outlook on the world, on business, and on startups. So you won't want to miss this. Coming up next.
You're listening to the GrowWire podcast, a place where you'll learn the ins and outs of growing a business, running a business, or even taking your big idea, career, or personal development to the next level. It's all possible. Our host, Fritz Nelson, the editor-in-chief of GrowWire.com, will take you on an exploration of growth through candid conversations with some of the most brilliant minds in entrepreneurship, entertainment, business development, and more. Whatever your goal, we know you'll walk away with the right tools to help fuel your journey of growth.
Before we get into this episode with Jason Calacanis, we'd like to share a word from our sponsors over at Blue Microphones. As Jason proves on his own podcast, everyone has a story to tell. And if you're a storyteller, you probably know Blue Mics for their iconic Yeti microphone, which has helped millions of people find and amplify their voices. Do you think maybe they might have like an angel mic?
An angel mic?
Yeah, we're talking about angel investing.
Oh, we should look in. I know they have a snowball.
Do
Maybe,
they?
Yeah, they do.
Why don't we have that?
Because it's really little.
Oh.
We need the Yeti. The Yeti is what we need.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So this is for the big voices like mine.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
All right. Well, if you're thinking about creating your own podcast like Jason has and we have here, recording some voiceovers, gaming, reading audiobooks, or what have you, then you need to check out Blue's new YetiCaster, the complete mic and boom arm system ready to connect to your laptop, bringing the ultimate broadcast studio setup to your home or office. That's what we use here at the GrowWire Santa Monica studios, and we really do enjoy recording with them.
In fact, I actually wanted to add a couple more. So,
Couple more.
microphones.
Oh.
For when we have
Are you
more-
asking for money?
A little bit, yeah.
A little
Kind of.
fundraising?
Right here. I just put
To
you on the spot
GoFundMe?
because you can't say no on a podcast.
Well, to get your hands on one of these setups, apparently just ask me or visit bluedesigns.com. See, that's what you need to do, Kendall. Visit bluedesigns.com and use the code podcast at checkout for a special price.
Podcast. Got it. Okay. I'll do that. But I also still need your credit card. Okay.
To get started, I want to go kind of back to the beginning for a few minutes and talk about maybe the Jason Calacanis the world doesn't know today. Although they know some of your background, I think, if anybody's heard you on a podcast that you grew up in Brooklyn. But what about the growing up of you?
Yeah.
impacted the trajectory of your career? I mean, your dad was an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think now that I'm an investor, I kind of look at a lot of these founders and I see a theme. Like, show me a great founder, I'll show you like a dysfunctional relationship with one of their parents or both. My dad was a bartender. He owned his own bars. He was an entrepreneur. And I grew up in Brooklyn in the late 70s and early 80s. And it was, it was rough and tumble is how I would describe it. And the bar was pretty eclectic. We had police officers, Hell's Angels, the Mafia, and Wall Street, and everybody in between would hang out at my dad's bar, which was called Beards. And my dad was John the Beard because he had a beard. And it was like having a dad who was the mayor. He was incredibly popular, and he could talk to anybody. Literally, we would have the head of the Hells Angels in New York City over the house, the sergeant from the local, police precinct, and guys from the Mafia who were running numbers and all kinds of other things in the bar. And I was a busboy.
Sounds like an episode of Peaky Blinders or something.
It was very similar to like a Bronx Tale or any of those kind of movies from the 80s. It felt like when I watched Goodfellas and stuff like that, I'm like, this feels a little autobiographical, or like an autobiographical moment of my childhood. But what it taught me was, I think, a lot of resiliency. The restaurant business is incredibly difficult. And I just put a work ethic in me, I think, that I really appreciate. My dad had us do every job at the bar. I was a porter with my grandfather, God rest his soul, who was a New York City firefighter for decades, and literally cleaned the bathrooms and swept up and cleaned the alcohol bottles and put them back in the speed rack. Then I was a busboy, a waiter, a bar back, dishwasher, prep chef. Any job that needed to get done, we did. And my dad used to come home at 4 or 5 in the morning with just a huge billfold, and he would hand it to us and say, count it out and fill out the deposit slips. And that's at the age of 8, 9, or 10 years old. And he would be handing us thousands of dollars, quarters, singles, $2 bills, whatever. And we would be organizing it. Then we'd get to the bank. He would hand us we'd take the deposit slip. He'd go in and say, get me like $200 in quarters, get me this many singles, and deposit this money. This is at the age of 8, 9, and 10 years old. I'm going into the bank, barely able to reach the teller, and they knew who we were. And, oh, how's your dad? Yeah, tell him we'll be there on Saturday night at Beards. And I would be getting the quarters. And I'm walking out with, a couple of $100 in quarters, barely able to carry them in a big, huge box. And it taught me a work ethic. And when I went to Manhattan, I went to school at night at Fordham in the late 80s and early 90s, the internet happened. And I thought I was going to be a cop. And then after I went to college,
not a bartender, not a bar owner.
No, I thought I'd be a great police officer. My brother and I both took the police test. He went in, and then I, at the last minute, got accepted to Fordham University, which was kind of my dream school. And I went to Lincoln Center at night while working as a waiter during the day. And then I thought I was going to be in the FBI. And so I got the application. I was going to go to John Jay for criminal justice. But the internet happened, and I started a zine. And a zine was like the original website or startup in the 90s. If you wanted to do something cool, you would just get your friends together, write a bunch of articles, take some pictures, do some illustrations, and photocopy them, put a staple in the corner, and then sell it for $10. And it was called a zine. And that was like my first thing. Silicon Valley Reporter was a zine.
What was the spark about the internet back then? I mean, we can all look back in history and say it now, but what did you see then?
Yeah, it was super clear to me, having, been the first generation to grow up with a computer. In 1976 or 77, my dad came home with the Sears Atari 2600, and my friends were getting Commodore 64s. And I had been on a CPM 80 machine, I think it was called, back in the day, and we were learning how to code BASIC and then Pascal. And my mind was blown by that. And then my dad bought me the PC Junior in 82 or 83 when I was 12 years old. And somebody in the neighborhood had a Ventel 300 baud modem. It's this giant device, and you plugged it into your phone, and you could call up a bulletin board system and leave a message and then hang up.
BBS.
A BBS. And we were on BBSs trading wares and doing phone freaking and all kinds of crazy stuff. And that to me was eye-opening. And then when I got to school and I saw the internet, there was somebody who was, I remember it was yesterday, there was somebody who was working in the computer lab. We were all working in the computer lab making $2.50 or $3 an hour. And I was partitioning the hard drives because nobody knew how to do that. And somebody was doing the send command, and they were sending messages to somebody they were dating in like Argentina or something in South America. And he said, watch, I'm going to send, what did you do last night? And then you'd see hop, DC, hop, Florida, hop. And I was like, what's a hop? He's like, well, it's hopping from one computer to the other, and it's going to eventually get to her. And then we wait, and then she'd say, I had spaghetti. And then he'd say, okay, now I'm going to tell what I had. And I was like, you're talking to somebody in Argentina. Like, phones worked at that time, but the idea that you could be sending messages and watching them hop. And I said, what is this thing? And they said, it's like the bulletin board systems, except it's like connecting all of them together. I'm like, how? And they're like, phone lines, like ISDN lines. And I'm like, how? And that was basically, and then they're like, oh, well, there's FTP and there's Gopher. And then all of a sudden the web browser came out, and it didn't have images or pictures on it. It was just text. Everything was gray. You remember this. And that was also mind-blowing. And it just seemed to me that CD-ROMs and multimedia were kind of hitting, and I thought that's really interesting. And the online servers are interesting, but the internet kind of pulled all that together, and nobody owned it. And that was the big reveal. You didn't need permission. And up to that point in society, if you were going to do something, you needed to ask a gatekeeper's permission. So if you wanted to be on AOL or Prodigy, you needed to get somebody from those companies to give you permission to be on the platform. You had to take a meeting. If you wanted to have your magazine in, Tower Records and have it on the shelf, you had to get a distributor. Record labels, you name it. And we all just thought, Gen Xers, wait a second. The internet lets you reach any consumer on the internet, and there's like 5 million of them now on the internet right now. And you can just give them whatever you want, and they can consume it. You don't have to ask permission. That was the thing I remember very distinctly talking about with people, that you didn't need permission anymore. And for today, you just take that for granted. It's like, yeah, well, of course you can reach 2 billion people on the planet with whatever you do. Like, I can make a viral video and 2 billion people can see it, and I will be famous for Gangnam Style or whatever it is that I make. But that was a truly unique concept, that a gatekeeper could not stop you anymore.
I'm trying to remember too, back in those early days, do we have to give our real names, or did we?
It was all pseudonyms. I was the Cyber
okay.
Surfer, was my nickname on Pipeline and the other online services. So I was the Cyber Surfer because I liked Silver Surfer, the character. And cyber punk was kind of a thing, William Gibson. So I put the two things together, and I was the Cyber Surfer. In fact, I did a magazine before Silicon Eye Reporter for 5 issues with a company called Starlog, called Cyber Surfer, which was about multimedia. So I had done 2 magazines when I was 23 and 25 years old. And I don't know what possessed me to think that I could do that.
I was just going to ask, so why?
But I had seen other people do it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I want to be famous.
So you thought starting a zine would make you famous?
I had some very peculiar ideas about what fame and power was. And the laughable, kind of interesting one was, I would go to Manhattan and I would go to like different cafes and read magazines. And I remember looking at Paper Magazine and Esquire and Time Out New York and Village Voice and all these different zines and stuff. And I'd say, wow, who picks who's on the cover? Not who's on the cover, but who picks who's on the cover? That to me is the height of power. How do you get that job?
Right.
And so I opened up the magazine and I saw the masthead. And I was like, publisher, editor, CEO, editor-at-large, managing editor. Like, who are these people? What do they do? And then I tried to meet them. And I wound up in my youth meeting David Hershkovitz from Paper Magazine and Kim, and they hired me to write a column. I met Graydon Carter, And I met Jan Wenner from Rolling Stone and Graydon Carter from Vanity Fair, and they all gave me incredible mentorship in New York at the time when I was starting the magazines, and they were available to me. And then I met some of the .com folks. Industry Standard came out after Silicon Valley Reporter came out, but Mondo 2000, Wired came out the same time I was doing my magazines, right before the internet hit. And Upside and Red Herring were the two magazines in the early days of...
I remember Red Herring. That was Ohm's.
Yeah, Ohm Malik had worked at Red Herring, and then Upside was a guy named David Bonnell.
Oh, yeah.
And there was Upside magazine, and there was Red Herring magazine. And they both covered the technology business with a very, edgy kind of approach. And then John Battelle, our mutual friend, did Industry Standard. That got huge.
Business 2.0.
Business 2.0 was big. Inside.com was big. I now own Inside.com. Took me 12 years to get that domain, but I got it. And I just thought magazines would be the way to become powerful. Because I grew up in Brooklyn without power and, with no money. And I thought, I need money and power. How do I get it? Start a magazine.
Yeah.
It worked.
It does. I mean, I just... in one of my last jobs, I ran a website called Tom's Hardware. And
I love Tom's Hardware.
It started in 1996.
Of course. Yeah.
Online, no print.
No print, yeah, it's great. If you want to get your graphics card benchmarked and your DRAMs and whatever, it's the place to go to get the right benchmark.
That's right. But back then, I mean, it was all, anybody who had the foresight to start online.
Yeah.
Obviously you didn't have the costs. So maybe it was more out of necessity than foresight.
That, yeah.
But it worked.
Yeah, it was pretty punk rock, the internet. Most people thought that it would be shut down by the government or hacked out of existence. And most people did not want to invest in it, and companies were scared to be on the internet. The idea that you would put a company on the internet was risking your company and your job if you suggested to build a website. So at the time, Sony was like, I don't think we want to be on the internet. That's just uncontrollable. Bad things could happen there. And I was working at Sony as a network architect and engineer. And I remember they were like, hey, you know about the internet, right? I was like, yeah. Can you put it on a couple people's computers? I was like, sure, I can put Mosaic on their computers. I put it on their computers. They're like, we found this website with Billy Joel's album covers on it. And they're like, can you come up to the Sony Club, which was a private restaurant on the top floor, and meet with us and tell us what this is? And so I'm meeting with them and I'm showing them what it is. And they're like, okay, well, we have to sue this person. We have to find this person and arrest them. They took the Billy Joel covers and they put the set list, the track listings. And I'm like, they're like, well, what do you think we should do? I'm like, why don't we hire him and make a web page for every artist? And they looked at me like I was crazy, like, who is this kid? Who brought this kid? Get him out of here. And then they wound up building websites, for Pearl Jam and Bob Dylan. And they really embraced it at a certain point in time. I'm like, oh yeah, this could be big and Sony actually, to their credit, really embraced it.
When did you move to the West Coast?
So I stayed in New York until after 9/11. And then I moved to LA for 10 years. And when I was in LA, I did the Weblogs Inc. business, the blog company that did Engadget, Autoblog, Joystick, and I sold that to AOL, and that was my first big win. After Silicon Valley Reporter, the magazine had just gone from $12 million in revenue to $500,000 when the dot-com business imploded. Everybody went out of business. Red Herring, Upside, Industry Standard. And in fact, I was the last person standing with Silicon Valley Reporter because I was so much smaller and I didn't have all these big leases. And Upside and Red Herring and Industry Standard, all of those publications came to me and were like, you're still in business? Do you want to run this? And I was like, maybe. And they're like, yeah, it's got $8 million in debt. I'm like, what? How did you run up $8 million in debt? But yeah, I moved out here. They
threw big parties.
That was actually, it's interesting. That's what killed a lot of these businesses was they had taken out multi-year agreements with the Ritz-Carlton Laguna Niguel for Industry Standard or Red Herring to do events that were $4,000 per ticket events in the 90s and the early 2000s. And they couldn't get out of them. And then they had these giant leases at the height of the dot-com boom in Silicon Valley. And none of those people would let them out of their leases, so the business as well went bankrupt. And it really made me think and become cautious when I built businesses in the future of overhead. I've always been very scared of overhead, not a good idea. But I started, when I lived in LA, Weblogs Inc., and I started working remote, built that business, sold it. And then Sequoia invested in a company I was building, and they said, hey, would you like to be a scout? Since you introduced us to, this Twitter thing, and you introduced us to this poker Zynga thing, and you told us to invest in Elon's company, and we missed those three. Can we just give you money to invest? And I was like, okay, what's the catch? I'm like, well, we'll split it with you. I'm like, don't you get paid like 20%? They're like, well, we get paid like 30, but we'll just give you half. It's not going to be anything consequential. It's just 25, 50K checks. We're going to call it the Scouts program. And I was like, Sequoia Scouts? That's a dumb name. You should call us Rangers. And they were like, no, we're calling you Scouts. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And they were like, you have to write a deal memo. I was like, I'm not writing a deal memo. They're like, Jason, we're giving you money and half the economics. We just want you to write like a paragraph of why you're investing. And I was like, okay, fine. So then they give me the deal memo for Uber, and they said, why does Uber exist? And I put, because cabs suck, period. And literally, when the Uber IPO'd, they emailed now the 500 scouts, and they said, here's Jason's deal memo for Uber. Why does Uber exist, and why will it succeed? Because cabs suck. That was the entirety of what I wrote. And that turned $25,000 into $120 or $30 million, according to the Wall Street Journal and other folks, reportedly.
Well, we're gonna come back to that, but
Yeah.
I want to talk about media for a minute because you're still in it.
I love it.
Yeah,
I'm a masochist.
But on you started weblogs in 2003,
4.
So did you? Where did you? I mean, I mean, at that time, blogs were kind of starting to be the thing.
Yeah. They hadn't been commercialized yet.
Okay.
Yeah. They were considered like LiveJournal and Blogger.com, movable type. Blogs had to be personal at the time. You had to, one person, one blog. There was like a whole set of rules. Had to be personal. You couldn't have an editor, and you couldn't have more than one person writing on a blog. These were kind of the rules that Dave Weiner and other folks who were kind of the pioneers in the space had codified. And then Nick Denton and I came in and started commercializing blogging. And we said, there'll be ads. And people were like, well, that'll be the death of it. And I was like, no, I think people should get paid to blog. They're like, no, blogging should not get paid. So it's sort of like the folk music scene, I would tell people, was kind of like that. Like Bob Dylan came in and started playing guitar and selling records, and it got really big. And it went from being like just a movement, this little tiny passionate group of people on St. Mark's Place or down in the Village to becoming like changing the world. And blogs did change the world. I mean, the idea that the top journalists no longer had to work for an editor, again, back to just completely disintermediating everybody and just going directly to the consumer. I had two people who worked for me. Sheni Jardin used to do our events. She was our events manager for Silicon Valley Reporter out here in LA. And I had met her. She was working at a law firm, I think, Latham Watkins. She worked for me. And then when Silicon Valley Reporter went under, she started working for Boing Boing. And then I heard all the Boing Boing founders, there were 4 of them, were making $5,000 a month. And I was like, wait a second, that's like $60,000 a year. I think she's making more doing the blog an hour a day than when she worked for me 10 hours a day. And then Rafat Ali started paid content when he was working for me, paidcontent.org.
Right.
And he's like, hey, boss, I heard you found out about my blog. I was like, your blog? Your web blog? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, all right, kid, I'm your editor at Silicon Valley Reporter. You're a terrible writer, Rafat. Like, I have to correct your spelling, your grammar. You can barely put a thought together. Like, you need an editor. Your blog is terrible. Blogs will never be anything. It's stupid. You're taking what's essential, an editor, and removing them from the process. Read your own words. I just looked at your blog. It's filled with typos and spelling errors. Nobody will ever take blogging seriously. 6 months later, I started the blog company because I was like, wait a second. I found out he was making like 10 grand a month. And I was like, wait a second. And now I'm an investor in Rafat's latest company, Skift. And he's like an amazing editor and entrepreneur. And blogging, was really special because certain voices, Om Malik, you mentioned earlier, or Peter Rojas, Nick Denton, a lot of those folks who were writers, when their editors were actually throttling them and taking out the best, edgiest part of their writing. And it turned out that there was a certain group of people that if they just wrote what they felt, it was going to be so compelling that it would be undeniable compared to the milquetoast, stuff they were reading. So it was very hard for Walt Mossberg to compete against Peter Rojas doing Engadget and previously Gizmodo, because Peter was writing 5-6 posts a day, and he was writing about everything, and he was super passionate. Walt was great, but he was filing once a week.
Right.
He couldn't keep up.
And he had to be staid. He had to fit within the guidelines of Wall Street Journal and all
Edited.
things D and
Couldn't say anything controversial.
Right.
And like Peter would come out and be like, this product is terrible, don't buy it.
right.
And he just really like bash things, and we would just print anything. So we would get stuff to our tip line, like when the Razor, I don't know if you remember the Razor phones from Motorola, Razor. I got a real quick legal education on copyright and leaked information. Razor was going to put a keyboard on theirs, and they were calling it internally the Razorberry. And so all the employees at these consumer electronics companies loved Engadget, and they would send screenshots and they would leak information. And we knew they were leaking it because they would send it from their actual email addresses, or we knew their names. Or they would submit through the tip form, and the tip form would have their IP address from their company.
Right.
And so the people from Motorola are like, hey, we're going to sue you. And I didn't have any money for attorneys at the time, so I just called them on the phone. So I was like, hey, I'm calling about the legal letter you sent. And they're like, who is this? I'm like, it's Jason from Engadget. They're like, oh, okay, can you have your attorney call us, or did you want to submit some paperwork? I'm like, no, I just wanted to talk to you about the issue. They're like, oh. I'm like, oh, okay, so we have the Razorberry. We're not taking that down. They're like, it's stolen material. I'm like, yeah, you think it's stolen, but we're actually interviewing your CEO next week on the website, on the blog. And they're like, what's a blog? I'm like, we'll get to that. But just so you know, like, if you guys actually sue us, it was sent to us by somebody in your building. So you're probably going to have to fire some people. Do you really want to do that? They were like, I'm an associate here. I don't know. Let me call you back. And it was literally every week some big, giant consumer electronics company trying to sue us. And I just told them, sue us. It would be great. We'll get in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. We need you to sue us. Please sue us. They really changed history. And Steve Jobs, I remember he got really upset because the iPhone 4 came out and it had the antenna. If you held it a certain way, it would drop the call. And so somebody put in the comments like antenna gate. Yeah. And they would always read the comments at Engadget and then make that the headlines of the next story. So they're like, antenna gate, blah, blah, blah. And Steve Jobs was like emailing us, like, what the And they kicked us out of the Steve Jobs keynote for the next one. And I emailed Steve at like 1 a.m. I'm like, listen, my guys are in San Francisco. They just want to go to your keynote. Like, your PR group is banning us over the antenna gate thing. It wasn't our fault. Like, I'm sorry that we used the wrong word or whatever. And he's like, you're good. And then like 2 a.m, the PR people like let us back in.
Is that the one where he said, don't hold it that way?
He said, don't hold it that way. Yes, you were holding the phone wrong.
Right.
Well, Steve, with the reality distortion field, was amazing. So literally, I was at one of the industry standard summits or D conferences, and Steve comes up to me and he sees I have the Engadget logo on the ticket, and he says, Engadget. It's my favorite site. I read it every day. I said, really? And he's like, yeah, I read it every day, twice a day. I said, thanks, Steve. And then I watch him. He walks over. He says the same thing to Gizmodo's editor. And he starts talking to Gizmodo's editor. He was working every press person. And the Gizmodo person comes up to me and goes, Steve just told me he reads Gizmodo every day, twice a day. I was like, he just told me the same exact thing. He was the master. The master.
If you want to challenge your company to innovate and elevate through laughter, Second City Works is the B2B side of this world-famous comedy mecca, the Second City. They've helped hundreds of Fortune 1000 companies inspire better performance using their award-winning improv and audience-driven techniques that are powered by humor. Interested in live events, hands-on workshops, campaign consultation, branded content, and a whole lot more? Yeah, they thought so. You can visit secondcityworks.com to learn more. And we got to actually see a little of this live on stage with one of our bosses, and it was pretty fun.
It was awesome. It was hilarious. It was great. And you can totally see how it works. Go check it out. secondcityworks.com.
Well, what the one thing about blogs that all the things you say are true, and I'm going to come off sounding like some old media curmudgeon here.
Yeah.
But the other thing it did was it kind of let everybody have a voice, and that you were, when Gadget was blogging, it was doing research, it was doing real work.
Yeah.
Then everybody thought, well, I can do that too, and they didn't put the research in. They didn't have the product. They didn't do any journalism. They didn't talk to anybody, but they just put forth the opinion part of the blog, and it made everybody think I can be a publisher too.
Yeah, that's a problem. It's a little bit of a challenge. It's kind of disappointing because when I came up, we were it was a vocation, journalism. Like, we were taught to take it seriously. And now it's like a whole generation who they were told, like, listen, your compensation in your job is based upon how many clicks, how many views, how many tweets, how many likes you get, whatever. And so I remember Nick Denton at Gawker was starting to pay people based on how many views they got. And some people were getting crazy bonuses. And then it just led to people wanting to do sex tape coverage or celebrity coverage, whatever. And Nick really got a lot of views because of that. But link baiting was basically what Nick Denton created at Gawker and in those publications. And now, since then, really journalism is about who can create, largely media production is about who can create the headline that creates the click, that creates the virality, that then drives the SEO. It has nothing to do with the search for truth anymore. And I think that's one of the reasons podcasting is really surging right now, because like the original blogging, before it got corrupted, as you correctly point out, by SEO strategies and social media strategies and link bait, podcasting is very authentic. Like, we're having a conversation here, you hear my voice, and if I don't make any sense, like, people are just going to stop listening, right? Like, podcasting is the truth. And I think that's where all the meaningful conversations are occurring now. It used to be on blogs, but because of social media, everything's devolved into tribalism and there's no nuance. And I think podcasting is that exact reaction. And that's why advertising in podcasting, that's why consumption of podcasting, that's why people's desire to start their own podcasts are going crazy, because people are longing for the truth. They're longing to have a meaningful, reasonable, passionate, sure, but truth-based discussion. And that's what the best podcasts do. They're just iconoclastic people, in my experience, who want to have a real discussion and have some nuance to it, right?
Sure.
And take half an hour, as opposed to you clicked on something on your phone, you saw the headline, you flipped twice, and you moved on to the next thing.
You skimmed it, whatever. What just one last question on the media side is, so now looking at where we are, and you mentioned podcasts, but like, to think about journalism and to think about media, if you were, and I know you own Inside.com as well, but of all the new models, podcasting, newsletters, subscription models, curation, what's going to work? If you were starting something today, how would you do it to make money?
Yeah, I think if you're going into the media business to make money, you probably are making a mistake. It's very hard to compete right now because advertising, about 90% of the advertising dollars, the incremental advertising dollars last year went to two players, Facebook and Google, because they're very efficient. Podcasting is a really great space, and newsletters are great, and subscriptions to newsletters work well because you don't need to win everybody. That is the death of media. When you're trying to make something for everybody, it will be, by definition, not interesting, right? What you want to make is something that's challenging for a group of people who really appreciate it, right? And so my podcast, This Week in Startups, is going to hit 1,000 episodes. And the advice I get from people all the time is, can you make it shorter? Can you make it more easier to understand or whatever? I'm like, no, I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing it for the 200,000 people who really care about startups. I'm not trying to get 20 million. That's when I go on CNBC. That's the 2 million people, or maybe it's 1 million, who knows. There's different venues for that. And I think there's going to be something special with the best voices having their own email newsletters, and we're starting to see that emerge, where that, again, direct, really considered words, positions in email delivered to your email box for you to pause for a second and read them. And that's what I'm trying to do with Inside. Now, we've got about 50 of those newsletters, and All of them are good or great, but I've got to get them all to great and exceptional. But they're getting there, and they're must-reads for people who are in those verticals. And the secret to media is not spending a lot of money. The problem with all the media companies was they just got so fat. New York Times had these giant offices that were really expensive, and they had layers and layers of editors, and they had a pension, and they had unions that made it very expensive to do what they did. I would estimate, like, out of every dollar they make, maybe 10 cents goes to the writer who actually wrote the stories. The other 90 cents is the rest of the overhead. What I'm doing with Inside is trying to get 70 cents of every dollar to the writer who wrote it, and then 30 cents for the overhead, right? And if I can do that, that means I'm going to have this huge advantage over the big companies. And it's not guaranteed that we'll be successful, but I think we did about $500,000 this quarter across the 50 newsletters. That's pretty good. We're going to figure it out, I think. And then the question is, can I get it from 2 to 10 to $100 million? Can I get it from 50 newsletters to 250 to 500? And it's going to be a long slog like anything else. Another 10-year success story, overnight 10-year success story. Like my podcast, people were like, wow, it's incredible. It got so big. I'm like, it's year 10.
Right.
It's literally year 10. I started it when I lived in LA and did it down the block with, an open air microphone. Those are the first episodes were like open air microphone episodes. So it takes time to build a brand and to have high quality, but the media business is tough. People are trying new experimental things, which I think are cool. And I think there's going to be a flight to quality. There always is. People get tired of eating whipped cream. And I feel like the link baiting stuff is like whipped cream. It's like whipped cream is really delicious until you get to the third spoonful. And you're like, this is disgusting.
Yeah.
Like if I put a bowl of whipped cream in front of you and I said, finish it, you'd be like, why did you do this to me?
Right.
And I put a little bit of dollop of it on your pie. It's quite nice. But you want that steak, you want that pie, you want the substance, right? And I think podcasting, email newsletters, or that substance that people are craving. And social media is that whipped cream, that the tribalism and the vapidness and, what it rewards is, people saying outrageous, outlandish things that aren't true because they get amplified.
It's instant reaction. It's a lot of trolling,
Tribalism. If I came out and said, the homeless issue is very complex and nuanced, and there's not one solution, I would get 0 retweets, no likes. Now, if I came in and said, this person from this, Mayor blank is responsible for homeless and they don't care. And they said, we need to cut the homeless things. I'm going to get 50 retweets and 1,000 likes and everybody's going to be on my side high-fiving. And that's just how our human species works. If you pick a side and, I think that's what Fox did. They picked a side and, New York Times picks a side now. And social media is just not healthy. And I've been trying to curtail my own use of it. It feels very unhealthy to me. And I think that's why podcasting is really having this incredible, resurgence of talk radio, is because smart people talking about complex issues is better than dumb people screaming into the void, trying to get likes and be outrageous.
Yeah, it's kind of like the blogs of the early days.
It does feel like that to me, and I had an opportunity to invest in Twitter in the early days, and they showed it to me, and I was like, Ev, you did Blogger, and that was a revolution, and now you've taken Blogger, and you got rid of the blog post, but you left the headline. So all you need to do is write a headline. You realize that if you do this, every idiot in the world is going to be writing headlines all day. It's going to be a cacophony of idiots. He's like, yeah, it's going to democratize everything. I'm like, you don't want to democratize this.
That's democratizing idiocy.
Right, exactly. And I was just like, and there is something nice about everybody being able to talk to each other, but when you add anonymity and you build the algorithm and you care only about engagement, that's the thing that's killed it. If they didn't have an algorithm and it was just reverse chronological order and they take out the likes and they take out the retweets and you just follow people and nobody gets amplified more than other people, it would lower engagement, but it would feel healthier because you would just curate your own feed. But what Facebook and Twitter and a lot of these platforms do is they're just saying, oh, this thing got a lot of likes, got a lot of retweets. See that first. Now you see it and you go, oh, I'm seeing that first. I should be outraged, or I should retweet it. Oh, that's how I should behave. If I want to get rewarded in the system, that's what I should do. And there's no nuance. There's no like intelligent conversation left on it. And Twitter in the early days was playful and fun and nuanced and interesting discussions. And I think all the intelligent people are like, you know what? I'm going to just step away from this, right? And, it's a pendulum. But like that whipped cream metaphor, I believe ultimately in the consumer's ability to at some point say, enough. I want something better. I want something. I think that's why, like, if you'll see like Preet Bharara, his podcast, Bret Easton Ellis, Joe Rogan, wherever you sit on the spectrum of who you like to listen to, stay tuned with Preet and Still Processing from the New York Times. Like, these go for an hour, 2 hours, and they really talk about things of substance. And I just can't get enough of it. I am addicted to podcasts now like I used to be blogs, and it's really changed my consumption of media.
I have FOMO of blogs. Let's talk about investment now. Little change to another hat that you wear.
Yeah.
Maybe your main hat these days. And now I've heard you talk on other podcasts about your philosophy on angel investment, but for our listeners, maybe you can just kind of give your philosophy on that.
Yeah. I am an angel investor and a seed investor. So I make investments of $25,000 to $2.5 million in about 80 startups this year I'll do. Next year, probably 150. I have a team of 15 people. And I wrote a book about it called Angel, where I just explained everything I've learned in the first 150 or so investments, the first 10 years. And I've professionalized this, but at its core, angel investing is about picking people who you think are going to succeed and who will not give up. Right? You really are investing in people. Everybody has the same ideas. So when podcasting's starting to get big, everybody's like, well, podcasting, there should be a network. Oh, people should pay for it. Oh, there should be analytics. Oh, there should be an ad network. Like, the ideas are obvious. What you need is somebody who's not going to give up and somebody who has the ability to really study consumers and build them products that delight them. And, Steve Jobs was one of these people who really delighted customers and really studied their behavior. And that's what I'm looking for. Founders who just have that, they're craftspersons, like they can really build something refined. And when I looked at Uber, and Travis was showing it to me for the first time, and he had 2 cabs on the road, the cab icon was a cab that was sort of driving west when you're looking at your phone. It was driving to the left, but it was coming south down the map. So it looked like it was drifting down, the Embarcadero. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's the cab? And it was like really jumpy. And he said, yeah, we're going to actually make like 6 or 7 icons that will turn it so it actually looks like it's driving in the right direction, not going down the street and knocking everybody over and flipping over and rolling down the street like it's a stud driver driving it. And I was like, this is somebody who's really thinking about every nuance of the product. And then I said, where's tipping in all this? He's like, we're just going to pay people, a flat rate. We're going to get rid of tipping because it creates friction. And I was like, well, I'm from Brooklyn. I like to tip. He's like, we just want to get you in and out of the cab. Tipping takes too much time. We're including it. We're paying more than they get and some things. And then I was like, well, what about the address? How do you get the address? He's like, oh, that's the best part. You don't have to tell the driver the address. You give him the address and then it launches the Google Maps. I was like, oh, because that's 90% of every time we would get in a cab is trying to explain to them where you're going. He's like, yeah, the idea is to take out all the friction. And I was like, wow, you're going to save 2 minutes of talking to the driver and telling them the address only to get it wrong. You're going to take out payment. It's just going to you just walk out. How do you know if it got paid? They're like, well, your credit card's in there. I'm like, how does the driver know your credit card works? He's like, well, we'll pay the driver if your credit card doesn't work. We're not going to let you launch an Uber if it doesn't work. I was like, wow, so many details he had thought about, right? And that's what you need is really an unhealthy obsession with your product in order to win. Because if you don't have that unhealthy obsession and you're not willing to get down to that level of granularity, you're just not going to win. And
But
somebody's going to come along and just totally beat you.
But at the same time, you also, you passed on Airbnb.
Yeah, I didn't have with Airbnb, I didn't take a meeting with them, but I had heard about it. And when somebody told me that idea, I said, wait a second. You're saying I'm going to stay on somebody's couch. It's couch surfing is how they explained it to me. I was like,
That was their pitch in the beginning?
yeah, it was originally it was originally based on the couch surfing phenomenon on Craigslist.
Oh.
So there was like a section of Craigslist where you would be couch surfing and you'd say, I have a couch, I need a couch, kind of thing. And so their original idea was to do couch surfing. I think that might have been one of the original naming ideas around Airbnb. And I said, so I would stay for $50 on somebody's couch. I said, like, a serial killer's couch? And they're like, no, it's not a serial killer. I'm like, well, how do you know it's not a serial killer? And they're like, well, because we have a reputation system and we have the driver's license. We do a background check. And I was like, well, serial killers are, sociopaths. Like, they'll know how to get a driver's license and fool your system. No, thank you. And then they're like, well, no, you can also host people in your house. I'm like a serial killer. I could host a serial killer. So I wake up in the middle of the night with somebody standing over my bed with like a giant, knife. And they're like, no, you don't get it, Jason. And I don't. If you ask any group of people in the early days of Airbnb, like who stayed in Airbnb, you'll see people under 30 years old, they've all stayed in Airbnb. People over 40, none of them have stayed in Airbnb. Now that's changed because the product also evolved. I didn't understand that for young people. Staying at an Airbnb would be the difference between going to Japan or San Diego. Like, they're going on vacation. They're either going to go to Arizona and stay at their friend's place, or maybe they're going to go to Tokyo and Kyoto and stay for $40 a night somewhere. And that was a huge unlock that I didn't see, but the founders did. And then the other one was that nobody saw, and this is why investing in people is so important, because things emerged that nobody anticipated. The thing that emerged with Airbnb that nobody anticipated is that people would actually buy apartments or, take pool houses and design them to be better than hotels. Now you stay at an Airbnb. I'm staying at a house here in Santa Monica that I rented. I think we rented it on VRBO, not Airbnb, but it's the same thing. And it's a better experience than being in a hotel. Sure. So it evolved. And Uber had a very similar thing. Nobody ever thought that people would go full Uber. That was a weird moment when a friend of mine, David Sachs, said, he had like that Porsche Cayenne or whatever, and he loved it. And I was like, he's like, I'll pick you up. I was like, oh, would you get rid of your Porsche? He's like, did you get a driver? And David was like, no, this is an Uber. I'm like, what did you do? He's like, I sold my car. I'm like, you sold your car? He's like, yeah, I'm full Uber. I'm like, what's full Uber mean? He's like, I only take Uber. He's like, I did a spreadsheet. And David Sachs, the famous, founder of Yammer, showed me like the spreadsheet. He's like, look, if I take this many rides, my insurance is this much, my parking is this much, this is how much my payment is. I could be full Uber. It cost me maybe 10% more than owning the car, but I get back all this time where I could actually be working. And there's a whole generation of people who are full Uber. You've got millennials now whose parents have them on their accounts. They're like, I don't want buy a second car for my kid and insure it. I don't want them driving. I want them to be safe, and full Uber. There was somebody who wrote an analysis of Uber where they compared it to the taxi industry. And they're like, there's no way this company's worth more than that. And then Bill Gurley, came in and dunked on him. He did the Series A. I did the seed round. He dunked on them and was like, oh, by the way, we have more cars on the road in San Francisco than there are taxis. So comparing it to the taxi business, you're not understanding what's happening here. This is inducing more behavior than currently exists. And that's what the great companies do. They induce a market to exist. They manifest a market that did not exist before. If you think about meditation, when we invested in Calm 5 years ago, we bought 7% of Calm for $378,000. I had met Alex, and I was like, meditation is going to become a thing. My friend Sam Harris, another podcaster, was like, yeah, meditation is huge. You should meet my friend over at UCLA. And I was like, UCLA? And like, yeah, they have a mindfulness program. I'm like, UCLA has a mindfulness program to teach meditation? They're like, yeah, they're studying it. I was like, wow. So Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal are doing meditation with Phil Jackson. There's a mindfulness school at UCLA. It's going to work. People can deliver meditation on their phones. into their ears, it's the same as going to a meditation guru. And there's no meditation gurus that you can go to. And there's no meditation classes in Boise, Idaho, or even in Brooklyn. Like, to find that would be hard, but you could do it on demand. So Calm seemed like an easy bet to me. And then now here we are 5 years later. It was the app of the year in the App Store. It's doing $160 million a year in revenue. They have over 1 million paid subscribers. And they'll have 10 million and eventually 100 million, I predict. Like, that seems completely plausible to me. And this little company that, nobody believed in, nobody would fund, if you just take a moment to think, what if it works? Your brain is trained to think all the reasons why things won't work. To be a great angel investor, you have to think, well, what if it does work?
So explain that, because I think, that gambling mentality is, any investor has some bit of that, but on the angel side, it's a little bit different maybe.
Yeah. So if you're investing in Netflix, publicly traded stock, you can look at the history of Netflix, look at the number of subscribers. They'll tell you some guidance. There's 60 analysts who are covering it. And so you just have to make the bet like, okay, is this going to hold up? And yeah, maybe I'll double my money. Maybe I'll lose half. But there's no chance to go 100x or 1,000x your investment. Nor does anybody expect that. You expect the stock market to grow at 7-8% a year. And over 7 or 8 years, you will double your money. In angel investing, my thesis is maybe every 30 or 40 investments, one of them will become a breakout, hit unicorn status, and return greater than 30 or 40 times your money. The problem is, what I studied was almost every person I met who had soured to angel investing had done 2 or 3 investments, or just one, put $250,000 into somebody's cousin's, roommate's, sister-in-law's brother, and that person blew the $250K and they lost it. There was no diversification, and there was no chance to hit an outlier. And so the concept in poker would be implied odds. If we get into a poker hand and you have $500 in front of you, I have $500 in front of you, if I get you to go all in, even if I have slim odds, the most I can win is 500. But now if the most I can win is 500,000, we're playing deep stack poker. Well, that's going to change how I look at playing the hand with you, because there's a big prize if you win. There's no big prize to investing in public equities. There's a modest, double your money every 7 years. It's great. With angel investing, you have this outlier. So in fact, if the idea makes total sense, it's likely not a good angel investment. It's a good public markets investment. Netflix makes total sense today. Netflix did not make sense when they said we're going to mail envelopes to people and have them mail them back to us, and this is going to work and it's going to kill Blockbuster. And nor did it make sense that they're going to buy people's libraries and stream it to people. In fact, Mark Cuban, who had done streaming, said, I don't think the internet can handle the bandwidth. Eventually it did. And so what I tell people is make a list of all the reasons of why this company will fail, and make a list of the 1 or 2 reasons that it might succeed. Rip up the list of why it could fail, because it takes no effort to understand why something could fail. What you want to understand is, what would the world look like if it did succeed? And if you take Airbnb as an example, or Twitter, who would ever predicted that the president of the United States would be using Twitter? I certainly didn't see this when I had the opportunity to invest, that the president of the United States' main communication method with the world would be Twitter. If I told Evan, Biz, and Jack 10 years ago, guess what? The president's going to wake up every day at 5 a.m. and send out 10 tweets, and that's what's going to be covered for the next 24 hours. And he's not going to do press conferences anymore. They'd be like, come on. Right?
But that's what happened.
And that's exactly what happened. And you look at Airbnb. What if I told you a young person could go anywhere in the world right now and stay for $50 a night in a really cool place that's as cool as a $200 hotel room? You'd be like, well, that's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. If I told you could get off the plane in Qatar or Sydney or London and use your same Uber account to take a ride somewhere, and it would be half as much or a third as much as the taxi you were paying for last year, you'd be like, well, that's crazy. Like, you have to just retrain your mind to say, what if it does work? And what if it pays off 100 to 1? The big investments I've made, Uber is a 5,000 to 1 payoff. That's not 5,000%. That's $5,000 for every dollar invested. Right now, Calm.com is paying off at probably $200 to 1. We put in $378,000. It's worth $60 million. This is a whole different way to reprogram your brain to understand odds. Our brains are not meant to understand this type of outcome, and you have to kind of retrain yourself. So when I teach Angel University, I've taught this course on angel investing 15 times now around the world, Hong Kong, Sydney, all over America, Canada. And when I teach it, I say, if you don't get to 30 or 40 investments, you're not going to have this experience. But if you do get to 30 or 40, you're likely to have this experience. One of them is going to pay for not only all the investments you've made, but all your future investments. Like, I can keep angel investing forever because I had a 5,000 to 1.
Which American company started with a guy in a garage, was featured on Shark Tank, and now has over 1 million customers? Hint, they're reducing crime in neighborhoods everywhere. Here's Ring Video Doorbell founder Jamie Siminoff with his secret to success.
It's true. In just a few years, we've had huge growth. We've hired hundreds of people, expanded our warehouse, and we're shipping millions of units a year, all while making sure our customers are happy. I've had lots of things to worry about, but I never worry about our finance and accounting because we use NetSuite from Oracle. From the beginning, NetSuite let me see what's going on with my business in real time, from revenues to expenses, customers and orders, even HR. I run my business from a dashboard right on my phone. NetSuite has been my business management system from 10 to a team of over 1,000, and NetSuite will be my choice as we continue to innovate and grow.
Go to netsuite.com/ring to see how Jamie scaled his business. You'll also get our free guide titled Overcoming Your 5 Obstacles to Growth. That's netsuite.com/ring for your free guide and the story of a great American company. netsuite.com/ring.
So your thesis is the more chances you can give yourself to bat, not at the obvious ones, but at the less obvious ones that we're going to have, that some of them are going to be unicorns.
Yep.
And you've hit on six
unicorns.
Six unicorns.
Yeah. And counting. I mean, there might be another 6 in the stable that just haven't gotten there yet. We have a bunch that are at 50, 100, $200 million valuations. And these are real companies now. I know a lot of people look at the unicorn kind of phenomenon and they're like, oh, things are overvalued, whatever. $160 million in revenue is what Calm is reporting. $160 million in revenue a year in their 5th or 6th year in business. I mean, these are real numbers. And this is a company with 40 employees. Like, it's bonkers. Like, Slack, Uber, Dropbox. Like, the list goes on and on of, like, companies that are printing money. Because when we started this conversation talking about the internet having 5 million people on it over this incredibly slow network. Now there's 2 billion people, and they have a supercomputer in their pocket to complement the laptop or desktop they use for an hour or 2 a day now. And that supercomputer is on a high-speed connection that's faster than any connection that existed 20 years ago. Like, literally, your 4G connection, your LTE right now, is faster than anything we had in the 90s available to us. That's mind-blowing. And the number of the original discussion of why people derided the internet, I remember it was like yesterday, is nobody will ever put their credit card in the internet. Apple's releasing a credit card next month. People are more than willing to ship imaginary money to each other, Venmo, credit cards. People are like, yeah, I can put my cryptocurrency. Yeah, that's what I meant by imaginary money.
Right, okay.
Monopoly money, Chuck E. Cheese tokens, Bitcoin. People don't care. They're like, whatever. Yeah, money. Yeah. People are buying cars online. I bought 4 Teslas in the last decade without ever talking to a human, right? The idea that people would buy a ticket on a flight or a hotel room was crazy. Now people are buying rooms in other people's houses they've never met.
Yeah, I went to France with the trust that the Airbnb that I got there was going to,
actually be there.
And there was no doubt in my mind.
Right. Because if there was, they would have gotten bad ratings and been kicked off the platform by now. Right. And you also thought to yourself, and even if this person were to flake, because that was the number one objection people had, how do you know if this person's going to be crazy or not? How do you know they're a serial killer? How do you know if they're going to be there? You're going to give them your money. And it's like, well, all that got worked out. But when evaluating it, those would be very valid concerns. So all you have to do is suspend disbelief. If it does work, what would the reward look like? What would the world look like? So if we're talking about AR right now, augmented reality, this is something that seems absolutely crazy. Augmented reality, you put on some glasses and it projects onto your eyes something in the world. So if we were looking at each other, we would see our mutual connections above our head. If we're walking down the promenade in Santa Monica, we would see what's on sale. We would see how long it would be till the next, set of donuts were coming out. That seems crazy. It's not going to seem crazy in 10 years. Right. It's going to seem obvious that you're never going to walk up to a person and say, have we met before? Because you're going to have glasses on and it's going to say, here are the 17 emails. Here's the tweets that you liked of this person's. Here's who you know in common. And we're going to start on second base, essentially. We're like, oh, yeah, I know. You know this person, that person. Oh, you went to Fordham in the 90s. I went to Fordham in the 90s. Oh, you were psych. That's just walking up to a random person.
Right.
So if somebody comes up to you with an idea for AR and they're like, it's very easy to say like, well, I don't know if people are ever going to want to do that. That sounds creepy to me. Or I don't know if people are going to buy the glasses for $500. You're like, you don't know if people are going to buy AR glasses for $500? Like, that's literally what I hear from people. I don't think people are going to spend $1,000 on AR glasses. I'm like, iPhone
right.
X
15 years ago
is $1,200.
Yeah.
Like, and people cannot buy enough of them. It's the great, and by the way, people feel $1,200 for an iPhone or whatever, $800 for the Pixel 3. They think it's the greatest deal in the world. And it is. You use it for 5 hours a day, divide 1,500 hours a year, it's 50 cents an hour, 10 cents an hour.
We panic if we don't have it, if we leave it somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, you literally, if you forget money, you would not go back to get money at your house. If you leave your phone, you will head back to your house. There's no doubt about that.
I want to ask you about, you have certain philosophies in your investing too. You're not super focused on Silicon Valley companies. You have, you've been pretty outspoken about bad actors. You sold your Facebook stock. You've told people that taking money from Saudi Arabia was not a good idea. Would you have had those philosophies back in your early investing days? Have you gotten the luxury of having those views, or were you always like that?
I've always been very opinionated, and I think the reason I continue to be is because where I grew up, being candid and being straight with people was rewarded. We're all the products of, I think, our childhoods. And so back to your original question about growing up in Brooklyn, people told it to each other straight, looked each other in the eyes and just said, like, if there was an issue. And I have a big issue with human rights abuses. And if I'm going to go make money by investing in companies, and these founders are going to go, make a lot of money for the investors potentially, I want to know what those rewards are going to empower in the world. I'm not comfortable with Saudi Arabia's stance on, gay rights, women's rights, and human rights. And I would not advise my companies to take money from Saudi Arabia. I blogged that. And I said, listen, Masayoshi-san, who's a friend of mine, and I said, I don't think you should take money from the Vision Fund either until he works it out. Guess what? He just raised his next fund. Saudi Arabia is not on there. And I think it's something, if you don't stand for anything, what's the point, right? And with Facebook, I believe there are, a lot of what they've done in terms of user privacy has made it harder for all internet companies. And so I think it's important to be able to take criticism and give criticism. I've tried to be a better actor and be a better investor. And,
Does that extend to like your friendship with Travis and what Uber went through and Robinhood, another one of your unicorns is going through right now with some of the controversy around that?
Yeah, if you're doing anything interesting in the world, there's going to be a debate about it, right? So that's fine. And I think it's how you respond to that. So with Uber, when they had their worst year ever and there was a lot of bad press, I was, you can be certain, working behind the scenes to make sure that those situations resolve themselves, even though I was a very small investor, because I care about them getting it right? And so I think as investors, sometimes you don't have a very large amount of equity in a company, so there's really very little you can do. In the Uber situation, I had very little, but I did have influence, I think, and I had a lot of conversations with Travis about the situation, and I think he sincerely wanted to make it better. And now I own much larger pieces of these companies, like with Calm owning 5 or 6% now after some dilution. With some of these other companies like Blockable, which is doing housing, we own maybe 15 or 20% of some of these companies. We have to be great stewards, and make sure we're doing human positive, world positive things. And I think about it a lot now. It was one thing when I'm just, throwing 25, 50K checks out there. It's a whole nother thing when I'm putting $2, $3, $4 million into companies and joining the board. And, I want to make sure those companies run well. And you can be sure I have conversations with every founder about this is how a company should run. And these are things you need to do early on to make sure the culture is established, the values, the morals, the operating expectation is done properly. And to learn from those mistakes that people make, and when they do, my job as now the elder statesman at 48 years old, not the punk kid from Brooklyn, radical zine publisher in the 90s, my job is to say, hey, listen, here's how bad this can get. Here's the scar tissue I have. I've watched some really gnarly stuff go down. Here's how to avoid it, and here's why you should be focused on it, right? Like I have to have a conversation probably every 6 months with somebody who gets an extraordinary amount of personal wealth and then starts deploying it in a way to kill themselves. We call it toxic wealth. Like literally every guy who makes a bunch of money goes and buys some very fast car or wants to be a pilot. And I don't see the female founders doing it as much. Seems like a very specific thing that guys want to do. Like, I'm going to buy a very fast motorcycle. I made a bunch of money. I'm like, you're going to die. And you just made all this money, and now you're going to kill yourself in your little 2-seat Cirrus plane? Really? And I had to sit somebody down who made 9 figures and was flying himself around on this little Cirrus plane with the parachute. And I said, listen, you made all this money. You've got kids. Put somebody in the right-hand seat who's got gray hair and has done flying for 20 or 30 years because you can afford it. And if you flip this thing and kill yourself, your kids are going to think, wow, my dad was so selfish that he decided he needed to fly himself around this tiny little plane and didn't even have the responsibility to put a $75K co-pilot in the seat next to him, right? And, it's like stupid stuff like that is now part of what I do for a living, is really sitting people down and saying, like, you don't need to go to the party, or you don't need to, be out there doing shots with your team and partying all night. Like, you're the boss. Act like it. Yeah. And it's, yeah.
I wanted to just ask one last investment question.
Yeah.
And you actually brought this up before I could, but female founders.
A lot more of them now. Yeah.
Well, I don't know what the statistics are now, but we had a stat from 2017 that females receive only 2.2% of total VC funding.
Yeah.
How do you look at that, and what are you doing to impact change?
Sure.
There?
Yeah, our team cares pretty deeply about it, and 3 out of the 4 managing directors on our team were female. And we weren't seeing enough women applying to the accelerator, and we weren't actually seeing enough on stage at our events, and we weren't seeing enough in the audience at our events. And probably 10 years ago, we started addressing these issues. And I'll give you the tactical things that you can do. One of them is we give free tickets to our events. So when we'd have Launch Festival or a Scale Conference, which we're doing in the fall, we would give away 2,000 tickets for free and then sell maybe 100 for people who wanted to come to the dinners and whatnot. And we would see organically 10 or 15% be women. We said, well, that's kind of depressing. We're giving away free tickets, and the audience is only 10% female. And then Jackie, who is our managing director of education, started increasing the number to 15%, 20%, 30%, 35%. And I was like, how are we getting these to go up? She goes, we put an optional question where you could state your gender on the form. I'm like, okay, how did that make it go up? She goes, well, no, I take the 10% and I email them and I say, do you know any other female founders? Hit reply so we can give them and introduce us. And it turns out if a female founder then tells another female founder they're going to the event, we went from 10% female in the audience to 20 to 30. And now our events, I think in Sydney, we had maybe 35% female in the audience. On stage, we had a similar problem. You invite, back in the day, Sheryl Sandberg, Marissa, and a very small cohort 10 years ago of female CEOs or COOs in Cheryl's case. And they're booked. Like, Sheryl or Marissa would be like, Jason, I need to work. I'm getting invited to 20 speaking gigs a week. I understand you need diversity on stage, but I also need to work. And we had to work really hard to then go find more women speakers and open up the aperture of what we were willing to talk about. And I used to be a snob about it, I'll be honest. Maybe 10 years ago, I was like, if you're not the CEO, you can't be on stage. And then Freda Kapoor said to me, Jason, what kind of world do you want your daughters to inherit? Why does it have to be the CEO? And I was like, I don't know. I just thought it was kind of like people always want to send their number 2 or number 3 person, and I want to always have the CEO. And she's like, well, you get to make the decision, so why does it matter? I'm like, I guess it doesn't. So then we started finding people who maybe weren't in the CEO slot and getting them on stage, or finding people who had something really interesting to say. And so our events went from being maybe 10 or 20% on stage being female or diverse to being over 50%, right? But we still weren't seeing enough applications for the accelerator. So we got the audience solved, we got the stage solved. And that started to make the flywheel go, because I think if people can see people on stage and they see people in the audience, they're like, oh, I belong here. Right. And I remember one founder told me she went to a Y Combinator event where they would have like a social thing, and she was an entrepreneur, and somebody came up to her and said, oh, is your husband a YC founder? And she was like, no, I'm not married. And they're like, oh, why do you work in PR or something? And like double insulted the person. And she's like, no, I have my own company, but and this was, it was somebody who had worked at Y Combinator or something. It was a Y Combinator alumni. And she was like, well, I guess I don't belong here. And 10 years ago, Y Combinator, like many institutions, were all, developer bros and not a lot of women. And so we saw that and we were like, So we started something called Founder University, which was people who were right before we were ready to invest in them. We looked for people with traction, maybe 10K a month in revenue, which is what Fitbot or Calm and other people had when we invested. We said, who's right before that? Let's do female Founder University and a Founder University just for underrepresented founders. And we let people self-select into it. So we had trans people. We had sometimes people who were gay or maybe Indian or Asian, which some people say are not underrepresented, they're overrepresented. I can't get into the politics of like who gets to, be categorized and as such, but we just let them do it themselves. And since we started doing Female Founder University specifically, we've been able to greatly increase the number of female founders we invest in. And it's very puzzling to me why we get many more females who want to come to a female Founder University than a regular Founder University. And it's something about the camaraderie, I think, is what they tell me. That because we do it just for women, people feel like we care. And if you contrast that to the Y Combinator experience that this one female founder told me about on the podcast, well, that's the opposite, right? So we kind of modeled like, let's do the opposite of what happened to YC in this experience. I think YC's really worked hard on it as well. They've become very diverse. And if you don't work, because they started a female-only conference as well. So if you really want to impact change in the world, I think you have to be very deliberate and strategic about it is the point. And
Can't just hope. You have to do
I think I was mistaken about this earlier in my career, which I was like, well, anybody can come to the event. It's a free ticket. Come. If you don't want to come, don't come. And I was kind of matter of fact about it because, like I grew up in Brooklyn. Like people were just like, if you take it or leave it, whatever. You want to do it, you do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. Then I was like, you know what? I guess I have some influence. I guess I can use it. Well, maybe I should use it, right? And I think, like, what's the sense of having power or influence or leverage? Like, I have a lot of leverage now. I have money. I have media. I have a network. Like, this is serious leverage. So I get to pick who's on the podcast. I get to pick, who speaks at the events. I get to pick who we write the checks to. If you are lucky enough to be a kid from Brooklyn who gets to write that check, then take the work seriously. And that's, in my book, I say, do the work, do the work. And that's our internal mantra with our team. It's like, let's just do the work. Let's work really hard and do the work to make the world that we want to see. And we can be the change, right? We can turn the, tide, even if it's just 1 or 2 degrees. If everybody turns it 1 or 2 degrees, Cheryl with her book, Y Combinator with their female founder, events, just everybody turning it a little bit more just, it'll get there. And I think our industry gets a little bit of a bad rap because people have such a high expectation of us. They expect us to be better. Well, we should be. And I think that statistic with the 2.2% of dollars, I think that's a trailing statistic because if you look 10 years ago, that's specifically venture dollars, not deals.
Right.
If you were to zoom that in on accelerators, I would say it's probably 30% have female founders right now. That's how attuned Techstars, Y Combinator, Launch Accelerator are to this issue. The reason that number is so, I think, dramatic is because 10 years ago there was a much different spectrum, and then most venture dollars go to late stage deals now because they're not going public. So in that statistic is $10 billion privately going into Uber.
Some years ago,
right? And so these are 10-year-old companies doing these giant financial transactions. I'd be very interested to see seed investing, accelerator investments over the last 10 years. And I bet you that paints a much different picture. The world is getting much better in this regard. And you see it also where I think it's super important, which is the number of female investors. That's changing dramatically because starting about 3 or 4 years ago, I think after Ellen Powell's trial, she may have lost, but I think she probably had some very valid concerns in her case, even though she wasn't able to prove it or win it in San Francisco, right? Like she should have been able to win it if in San Francisco, if anywhere. But I think that highlighted it so much because venture firms knew that they were an old boys club, and they're like, wow, the world is now watching. We need to change this quick. And people started publishing statistics on each firm, how diverse it is.
Yes, I remember that, yeah.
And I can tell you because, listen, I'm not in the venture, capital space. I'm in the seed fund space, a little bit different, the accelerator space. They were panicked. And they're like, we need to get partners on board who don't look like white dudes from Stanford or Harvard Business School. And it was a little bit of, I think fudging of the numbers a bit. Like people would put a female. I remember meeting somebody who's a PR person, and they introduced me as the partner at this venture firm. And I'm like, oh, you transitioned out of PR into investing. That's awesome. What have you invested in? Are you on any boards yet? And they're like, I don't actually invest. I'm like, well, what do you do at this venture firm? And they're like, I do PR and marketing for the other partners. I'm like, but you're called a partner. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, oh, that's super interesting. Like, I'm going to just name everybody a partner at the firm.
Right.
And
change
then,
the statistics.
But you don't have check writing ability. Right. So that I thought was pretty nefarious. And I think that's changing now. And so that's what people, and you know what? These young entrepreneurs are different. Like millennial entrepreneurs, like they'll make a decision based on the composure of your firm. They'll make a decision based on you having Saudi money. And that's what I think, a lot of these VC firms are starting to realize. We're not going to get the next generation of awesome founders because the next generation of awesome founders might not look like Bill Gates. They might not look like, Mark Zuckerberg. They might look a little different. And if we're just a bunch of white dudes, like we might miss the next, Stitch Fix or Sophia Amorosa or,
The next great new thing.
And that's really, all of investing is about not missing the big ones. It's, how much you're going to lose when the company goes out of business. I'm going to lose $50K, $1 million, whatever it is. You don't actually know how much you're going to lose by missing. You miss Uber, you miss Airbnb, you miss Dropbox, you miss Google. You'll be sitting there for the rest of your career going, oh my Lord, I miss Twitter. Like Twitter literally is a $40 or $50 million mistake for me. It's a 40 or 50. It was on the table right there. I was one of the first users. I was the number 2 user behind Robert Scoble in the first year of Twitter. Then Barack Obama won the nomination. He became number 1.
Right.
Like Scoble had 20,000 followers. I had like 15. And then all of a sudden Obama had 100,000. It's like, wow, this Twitter thing could be big.
It could
Don't
be
miss.
Yeah.
If you miss, that's where you're going to be grinding your teeth forever.
Yeah. Well, we're going to leave it there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This has been wonderful.
What a great way to end this podcast. The next generation of awesome founders are going to be more diverse and better than ever before. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much to Jason Calacanis for joining us on this episode of the GrowWire podcast. I also want to thank our editors over at Lampstand, our producer, Kendall Fisher. Thank you, Kendall.
Thanks for having me.
And all of our listeners for tuning in. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Bye.
You just listened to the Grow Wire podcast with host Fritz Nelson. Make sure to keep tuning in for more episodes full of tips, tools, stories, and strategies to help take your personal and professional growth to the next level. Until next time.